Hey everyone, welcome back to Concordia University's For Space. Thanks for joining us again for another part of today's event, Space Day. To help situate you, we're streaming to YouTube Live. We're in For Space. We're located on unceded Indigenous lands of Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. Today we're running a series of workshops, conversations, all as live stream Zoom meetings. So anyone joining us there, if you have any questions, just pop them into the chat. But primarily we're here to have some questions happening in the space. And so just so everyone can hear, just raise your hand, we'll bring a microphone over to you. And with that, it's my pleasure to pass our microphone over to the president of Space Concordia, Simon Randy. Simon, welcome back.
Thank you. So I'm just waiting to get my questions, but if anyone has a question now from the audience, I'd be happy to answer. But until then, yes.
Can you tell me about your role in Space Concordia specifically?
So I guess my job is to make sure everyone is doing well, find, if there's any blockers for any of the teams to get rid of them, and if there's ever a hole in our executive team or in any of the engineering teams, I'm just responsible for making sure that's filled, and then just maintaining the long-term vision of the team, and just being the one person that gets in trouble if anyone does anything weird. And yeah. Alrighty, I have my question. So the first question that I have here is, can international students participate in space-related activities in Canada? So the answer is yes, asterisk. There are certain programs in the space industry that are controlled. They call it the Controlled Goods Program, CGP. And so I think you need to be a permanent resident to work on CGP. And it's similar to like ITAR in the States, where some of the space technology is considered military, and so not any international student would be able to work on it. However, at Space Concordia, we are not considered controlled goods, and so you'd be able to join us and help work on our projects. So, we're very open to international students. Next question is, for those who missed a deadline for summer and won't be able to be there in the fall, are there opportunities further on? And yes, we are recruiting at all times. So while we are putting a focus on recruitment this fall, we are accepting new members at all times. And so you're welcome to join us at any time during the year. Are there any questions here in person before I move on to my next one online? One second. Oh, we're
one more time
microphone.
so that we can hear you.
Can you tell us more about the solid rocketry division?
Sure. So the solid rocketry division is one of our newer teams that has made a reappearance in Space Concordia, and they go and compete in New Mexico once every year to compete in in what used to be called IREX, so the International Rocket. I think it's the Intercollegiate Rocket Engineering Challenge, and now it's called the Spaceport America Cup. And they are building rockets that are powered by solid propellant, so similar to a firework. And if you're interested in working on, aerostructures, flight performance, so trying to figure out how the rocket will behave in flight, or composites, you could work on the flight computer. There's all kinds of opportunities for solid rocketry. So it's a pretty cool team to be a part of. Then online, my next question is Space Concordia favoring more experienced undergraduate/graduate students, or can first years be involved? And if so, what kind of work can these people do? So what's pretty cool is we don't really have any requirement for joining. The point of Space Concordia is to provide everyone with their first hands-on engineering or business experience. And so anyone who is interested in space and willing to put in the work can join us and would be able to contribute to the team. And the type of work you'd be doing is similar to any other member. So we have engineering tasks, there's testing, there's design, business, sponsorship. So really whatever you can think of that you are majoring in and would like to work in the future, you can do at Space Concordia. And there are all kinds of opportunities to do this kind of thing. Then another question is about meetings. So are they online or in person? How often? So each division of Space Concordia will have their own weekly meeting. So for example, the liquid rocketry team is on Sunday mornings. The spacecraft team will happen, there's a leads meeting every Saturday, and then a general meeting once a month. And then the robotics team similarly will meet on Saturdays, and I think the solid rocketry team meets once a week, possibly also on Saturday or Sunday. And then during the week, each subdivision within the divisions, so like in spacecraft, you'll have like the mechanical subdivision, and they will have their separate weekly meetings. And so you would only be required to go to your subdivision's weekly meetings and maybe the general meeting as well. And in terms of workload, the workload really depends on what you are willing to put in. So if you want to put in 5 hours, you can put in 5 hours. The amount of things you'll be able to work on or learn will be limited in that amount of time. But if you want to do 20, 30, 40 hours, go ahead. And that's where you really start to see the really cool stuff and get access to, doing R&D on a rocketry team in the liquids, or working on the actual flight hardware for the satellite. And yeah, so like we're not going to force you to work any amount of time. However, we expect that when you commit to a task that you would deliver on it, or let us know that you have an exam or you're going to be busy, so that we can hand it off to someone else and make sure that we're not delaying on any of our projects. Are there any other questions in person?
What kind of roles are there outside of just doing engineering? Like, for example, you mentioned business and marketing and sponsorship.
Sure. So you can imagine Space Concordia like any other company. So you can, work in business development. So like you said, we're always looking for sponsorships, because while we do receive some funding from the school, most of our funding or support comes from companies that are either donating money to us or donating hardware. And so that would be one job, would be to be a sponsorship, to have ownership over some of the sponsorship, and to reach out to companies and say, hey, we're Space Concordia, or we're Space Concordia satellite. We're looking for this component, and we found you guys. You're, a perfect fit for our use case. Would you guys be willing to sponsor us? Blah, blah, blah. There's also bookkeeping or purchasing. So figuring out what's the best way to make our purchases. That is, we do our due diligence. So we make sure that we're not spending money where we shouldn't, that we're within budget, that we know what we're buying, and then we do it quickly. And so that's a whole job in its own. Making internal documentation. So we have like an internal wiki that describes, how purchasing works, how recruitment works, onboarding, performing modifications to engineering files. And so you could be working in communications and either doing that, or you could start a podcast or a newsletter those kinds of things come and go as motivated students, come and go as well. So kind of you can if you want to start something or carry something on from someone before you, you totally can. We're basically functionally identical to a company, except that we're all volunteers. But it's like any other space startup, similar jobs. Alrighty. Then my next question is: do the skills that we learn in Space Concordia directly correlate to future opportunities in the future opportunities in the job market? If yes, which industries? So our skills definitely transfer. Like I said, this is kind of like working in a space company. So you're working on actual flight hardware and dealing with reality. So, parts don't line up, supply chain might be having issues. So there's a delay and you have to try and hit your deadlines. In some aspects, it's a little bit harder than working in a company, because in a company, after like 40 or 60 hours a week, you're done and you go home. But as a student, when you go home, it's homework time. And when you're at school, it's class. So you don't, and then you're adding a club on top. So it's pretty demanding. But you're able to gain experience before getting an internship, because you might want to get a job, but to get a job, you need experience. And to get experience, you need a job. So you're kind of stuck. And so in this environment, you don't need any experience. And you just invest your time, and then eventually you find yourself pretty comfortable with CAD or PCB design or software, to the point where you feel comfortable in that, and recruiters recognize what you've done, and you can take pictures of what you're working on and maybe make a portfolio of it. Or, for example, the company MDA, who builds satellites, they know us by name. And if you've contributed a significant amount to your team and you can talk about it, your chances of being hired, if your chance was like 1 in 100 by just having good grades, well, being part of Space Concordia, your chances are like now 1 in 20, let's say, just by working super hard on a thing you love and being able to have something to show for it. But it's not just limited to the space industry. What we're doing is we're training competent engineers or business people, and so you can go into any field. And what's nice about the space industry is it's perceived very positively, because the requirements are super stringent. For example, for satellites or rockets, you can't just throw something together and see if it works. You need to do your homework. And so going from the space industry to any other industry gives you a good advantage, and it's somewhat of a prestigious field to come from. But like wherever you want to go, I'm confident you'll be able to find something that you enjoy. Are there any other questions here before I move on?
Are there any upcoming events or competitions?
Definitely. So on Saturday, we're having an info session. So on the 9th floor of the JMSB building, we'll be presenting all of our projects in a lot more depth. So you can expect a 45-minute to an hour presentation about each project, and you'll be able to come and ask questions, and we'll be delving more into the technical aspects of these projects, and you'll be able to come and meet our team leads, and there you'll be able to join our team and get onboarded. So there's that. And then later this fall, we're also going to be doing Space Week. So we've got all kinds of fun activities planned. And then next year, we're hopefully going to be hosting a conference. And so that should be very exciting. So yeah, good question. My next question is, So what are the current projects and what are we planning on doing with them in the future? So currently we have 5 or so different projects. One of them is the robotics project. So they are building a Mars rover simulator to compete in the University Rover Challenge in Utah. And what they are building is a test bed for technologies that are used on actual Mars rovers. So for example, detecting signs of life with spectroscopy, which is just evaporating samples with a very strong laser and then measuring the emissions from that. And you can kind of see what element you just evaporated. So they're building a Mars rover analog to go and compete. So that's pretty cool. We have a CubeSat team that is building a satellite to be launched in 2 or so years with the Canadian Space Agency. And they are building a double payload satellite. So one half of the payload is a yeast production capsule. And so they're going to be studying the growth of yeast in microgravity, which would be one of the first of its kind for a payload like that. And then the other half will be another camera payload similar to our last satellite. And we expect to be launching with SpaceX when it comes time to launch. That's pretty exciting. Then there is the solid rocketry team, which I talked about previously. So they're launching once a year at the Spaceport America Cup and building, it's around a 9-foot tall rocket and launching to around 30,000 feet. And they compete once a year. Then there is the liquid rocketry team. So the liquid team is building the world's largest student-built rocket. And we're trying to be the first students in the world to launch a liquid-fueled rocket into space and would hopefully be the first non-governmental group to launch into space in Canadian history. So that's pretty exciting. And we're hoping on doing a launch next summer in Churchill, Manitoba. And then we have the space health team. They previously did a parabolic flight, just like Dr. Chris was talking about, on actually that same Falcon 20 plane. And up next, they are just starting a neuroscience research project on the effects of microgravity on the brain. So that's exciting. And yeah, so those are the various projects that we are working on. So there's a question about what's better, computer engineering or electrical engineering for space. I would say that both are very much attractive because you can't do one without the other. For example, the satellite team has a software team, CDH, that's command and data handling. They're the programmers that are building the operating system of the satellite. So that's definitely a big computer engineering project that you'd be able to work on. And there's also an electrical engineering team that is building the whole electrical system, so the wiring, the PCBs, and they're building the system that will be programmed, that will host the software from the CDH team. So there's room for both. It's really just down to whether you prefer hardware or software in the electrical computer world. So yeah. Any questions here?
Is there any reason why you're studying the growth of yeast in particular?
So yeah, lucky for you, Astro Yeast is coming in like 30 minutes to talk about their project. But a little summary is they are competing in the NASA Deep Space Food Challenge to produce nutrients, like to use yeast as a source of nutrition for astronauts. And they are building a quite large machine to produce this where one day it could be produced in space. And so we're building a miniaturized version of that system to study how microgravity affects the way the yeast is growing. and they would use the yeast as a source of supplemental source of vitamins or nutrients while in space. So that's kind of why we're doing yeast.
Thank you.
There are any other questions? I'm at the end of my list here, so.
There are companies such as Spin Launch that doesn't require fuel to launch their rockets. Is it the future of space space launch?
You're talking about a spin launch?
Yeah, so it's like the
So I think there's definitely space for innovation, but because of the heritage that chemical propulsion has, especially on Earth, I don't really see a reason to switch out from that unless we get to like space elevators or skyhooks, simply because they're reliable, we know how they work, and that, yeah, it's a pretty mature, relatively mature technology. But spin launch would be a great system to have on the moon, for example, because the amount of energy required to enter lunar orbit is a lot lower. I think it's 1/6, just because the gravity there is 1/6. So you would be able to spin launch your way into orbit on the moon much more easily. But on Earth, mostly because of air resistance and our gravity, chemical rockets tend to be the preferred option.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions before I finish up? All right, well, thank you everyone for coming, and hope to see you on September 7th.
Thank you, everyone. And so, as Simon Randy just mentioned, we have our last panel coming up in about 25 minutes on astro yeast. Stay tuned.